Hello. It is Q here from the Future of Food at South by Southwest. So, one of the people that we would say is such a huge inspiration, a huge, impactful person, and her background and her story just mesmerizes everywhere she goes. So because we have this lovely screen, I'll give you a hint. It is Arlan Hamilton. When we, first bumped into Arlan, it was about her About Damn Time book, and we're like, this lady has such an inspiring story that every time she shares it or tells it, it really causes people to go to the next level of whatever they're doing. It just so happened that she also has made some critical and significant investments in some food tech companies. But today, we wanted to highlight Arlan because when we did a survey of our speakers and sponsors, the shocking thing that we found is that most of them said that they had been impacted by food insecurity at some time in their life. We weren't expecting that because now you have all these people who are very illustrious, building amazing things, but the fact that they have had food insecurity, it's that emotional connection that we know that people have with food as a whole. So in this video that we're going to feature and show you, we're going to highlight Arlan. And we asked her to speak to food insecurity so that it can be destigmatized and not something that people feel like they can't share as a part of their story, even if it starts engaging them in a way where they build, invest in, or craft or create the next thing that can really be a solution towards food insecurity, food access, and food justice. So with that said, take it away, Arlan and Q.
Hello, everybody. This is Q Fagan here, one of the co-organizers of Future of Food at South by Southwest. I'm so excited about our next thought leadership panel because how this came about is that we have the title, De-stigmatizing hunger and investing in change. This was really important for us to bring to the thought leadership of what is Future of Food at South by Southwest, because one, there's still statistics coming out about how much people experience hunger. But even more importantly, and where it hit especially home for us, is that when we surveyed our speakers and sponsors from last year and the year before, we were surprised but not shocked at how many people checked off that they've experienced some type of hunger or food insecurity in their lifetimes. So even though we had all these illustrious people, it was just amazing of how it touched all of them, no matter what their past background, gender, race, socioeconomic. So we really wanted to bring that conversation forward. And so we asked one of our great friends, Arlan Hamilton, of Backstage Capital to join us and give some personal anecdotes of what it means, what food hunger and food insecurity has meant for her. Hi, Arlan. You want to say hi to everybody?
Hi, everybody.
So first question, Arlan, is that what has food insecurity meant for you and in a very personal way in your life?
Well, I experienced food insecurity for most of my life, the majority of my life. I'm 42 now, and statistically, for more than half of my life, didn't necessarily know where food was coming from in a given day. And thankfully, I grew up where we were on programs and different things at school and SNAP and all the things.
Sure.
But it was always top of mind that I was hungry. I know people who know. The feeling of, and I also think that they get this wrong because I've been homeless too. What people get wrong about homelessness, as we know, homeless doesn't always look like it does on TV, or it doesn't always look like it does when you're going through your town and you see it. Sometimes it's an invisible homelessness. A lot of times it's women and children. And that's the same thing with hunger. And it plays into so much of not being able to pay attention at school, having anxiety, having maybe even acting out. Because as an adult, when I get hungry, what do? I get cranky. Right?
Cranky.
So when you think about that, there's so many things that can be going on with the child at school or in an environment. And sometimes and most of the time, it's just written off as this person's a problem child. And you never know, did they have breakfast that morning?
Absolutely.
Are they worried about dinner? And is one the only meal they're getting because it's at school? And so that's where it really started with me. And I have to say my mother was absolutely incredible making ends meet. And it never got to a point where I, was starving, but definitely. And then into my adult years, when I was homeless, when food stamps would run out, even the act of having food stamps. I remember when it used to be, you'd peel off a piece and you'd have to, and then it changed to the card in Texas. That's where I was, and I remember thinking, wow, this gives me an extra amount of dignity.
Yes.
Because I'm handing over a card that could be my debit card if people aren't paying attention too closely. So it was just a very acute understanding that it was important.
Sure. I love that you connected, like if you're hungry, it's going to impact all these other areas in your life. It's not just the directness of it, because I think a lot of people don't associate with behaviors and experiences with the fact that people are hungry. So I love that you said that. And so let's pivot for a second. So what has been one of the most inspiring associations that you've had with food in your life? Because you're well traveled. I know you've experienced a lot. Like, tell us one of those food experiences where you're like, whoa.
Let me tell you, I am a pretty simple gal. I will take my Tex-Mex. A tamale is my favorite thing. I'm very much a creature of habit, so I'll get the same thing every time I go to a restaurant. But what has been inspiring to me has been watching my mother experience food in different places. Because she makes it's like the Queen of England has just walked in, and it is a process, and she appreciates it so much because that's not what she always had, right?
Right.
So she will take video footage and it's a whole thing. And it's the most delicious thing she's ever had in her life until the next day. And that inspires me, and it actually we have built some of our trips around what kind of food we're going to get, So it makes me happy. I know that she's having a good time if there's this wonderful meal involved, and that if that's the takeaway that she had. Yeah. Right. And to that point, I can remember certain trips based on where did we go? What did we eat? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's exciting.
Absolutely. So thank you for sharing that with the audience. And I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people because I know it certainly resonates with me. Yeah. So, you being the founder of Backstage Capital, who was one of the pioneers in investing in underrepresented startup founders who are really trying to solve real world issues with their startups. I can't imagine like what you just shared and bringing that forward to what it was like to write that very first check. Right. So describe to us what that was like the touch, taste, feel of it, you just think about that.
If I think about it, and I may be getting this wrong because I'm just thinking through. I think the very first check that went to a food company must have been when I did a pitch competition, kind of on the spot, $5,000 to partake in 2016. That had to be it. Now we've gone on to invest hundreds of thousands, and every time it's wonderful. And you think about the other companies. And what I like about it, and to your point, I like that we've invested in, Gooder and Journey Foods and Planet Forward and Partake. But if the first check was 2016, the most recent would have been this year, that into those companies again. So it's not just a one-time thing. It's they're performing so well. We have had multiple rounds with these companies.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? Because it is such a staple. They're all in their own way, either trying to right a wrong of the past or create the future.
I love that. Love that. And how do you think that has really played into who you choose to invest in and ones that you pass on when it comes to food?
I think I maybe subconsciously had been doing it, but it's just like with any other investment, I wanted to have impact. It doesn't have to necessarily be social impact. It just needs to make waves. It needs to cause a ripple effect. And there are just some companies where I say, well, where's the differentiator? What is so different about this cookie or this next thing that is going to change, lives? Hopefully, I love impact, that type of impact. But what's going to keep you going as a founder for a decade or more? The chips are down, no pun.
Yeah.
and what is also going to maybe hopefully affect millions of your customers. And you see that with the 4 that I listed and others that we look at. And if we pass, it doesn't mean that they're not doing something great for them and great for some people. It's just that I like to look at it as you look at Julia at Planet Forward. If she gets this right, what would that do to change lives and change the world?
Right.
If Jasmine continues to get this right, how many people are not going to suffer the hunger that we experience, and so on and so forth. It's really about how far-reaching what they do really is.
Right. Absolutely. Love that. I want to go back to something that I just heard you say. It's the first time I think I've ever heard someone say this phrase who's in your position, is they said that one of the things that that is unique about the portfolio company that you invest in is that they're trying to right a wrong. I don't think I've ever heard that before. And so what is that like? Explain that a bit more, expound on that a bit more, because I think that's a very interesting phrase.
Well, I think of Gooder, for instance, Jasmine. When I think about the way that they're repurposing food that's being thrown out or left discarded, and they're getting it into bellies of people who are hungry on a day-to-day basis, and in real clear and present danger of being hungry. And they're doing it in such a clever way of going to the airports, going to the big sports entertainment complexes, and just repurposing, just moving it around where it wasn't before, and making the infrastructure to make that possible. So it's not necessarily only, they do have a nonprofit arm, but it's not only that. It's like, no, you can replicate this, and we're the infrastructure to help cities around the world replicate this. But if you think about why they're doing that, Jasmine and the other people on the team, they themselves have experienced it in a lot of cases, but they've also seen this food is just being thrown out at the end of the day. Okay. Literally, people say at the end of the day a lot, but at the end of a day, this food is being thrown away when it could have helped nourish someone. And I think that every day that Jasmine and Gooder work and do the work they do, the for-profit and nonprofit work they do, they are healing a wound that is not of their making.
Yeah.
And trying to, turn that into something positive.
Right. What's so interesting about you saying that is that in 2021, when we thought about, really expanding what we consider future of food is connected to something that you said, which is that during 2020, during the pandemic, on the front page of USA Today, it was right here in Texas, it showed a food bank line that was 2.5 miles long. And during that same week, it hit news that they were discarding, and I forget how many tons, but I literally mean tons of potatoes in Idaho, because it was, with the restaurant shut down,
Yeah, they couldn't get
and
it.
I know it's complicated, as people say, but that was a travesty to us, a literal travesty. And so, thinking of, portfolio companies like you're talking about, Jasmine and Gooder, it's great that, there are companies that are looking for the solution part of it. And as you say, right or wrong, I think that's so powerful. And I just love hearing that from you, Arlan. So, as an adult, what has been, so outside of, talking about investing in portfolio companies, what has been your viewpoint of your family and friends when it comes to, the whole de-stigmatizing, hunger and their very lived experiences? Because I know you also do some investment, or I consider an investment in like scholarships that is in your mom's name and whatnot, and the investment you make with it comes to like sharing your knowledge and experiences in your book and in your talks. Like, what has been just the general, perception that you've gathered regarding people and, destigmatizing hunger?
It's something that I think about, that I hope that I'm helping to destigmatize just in my everyday success. And I don't, every day is a slam dunk. You see the highlights, but I think that the same way we started it by saying that there's this negative to being hungry, and it starts very young, obviously. If we can say, if I can be, by example, show what happens when you do have nourishment, when you do have that support and infrastructure as a human, what you're able to accomplish.
Yes.
It's as important as healthcare. It is healthcare. Food is as important as healthcare. It should be looked at as such. And I mean, I think it might be a tangent, but I also think about, I heard someone, I forgot who it was, but they were talking about the types of food you can get on food stamps. And I remember thinking this when I was on food stamps, like sometimes I want something fancy. Like I remember I would get like shrimp, like cold shrimp, because it was cold, so you could get it. I would get cold shrimp and cocktail sauce, and it cost like $12 of food stamps. And I remember like a couple of times the checkout person would get a little spicy. A little bit judgmental. Because if you're on food stamps, you're supposed to want. You're supposed to lack in something that you.
Yeah.
And I don't buy that. And it goes back, if we go back to Jasmine for a moment, one of the things, the thing that made me write the first check, and take note if you're a founder, because having this kind of story in your repertoire is great. When she did the homeless meals for homeless people, she didn't just hand them meals, which is, please do hand them meals, give them food, give them money. She also gave them a menu. She set a table with tablecloth.
Wow.
So what my favorite word is dignity.
Yes.
That's one of my favorite words. And talk about destigmatizing.
Right.
Because when I was in it, and I can by the way, I still feel it. I still feel it viscerally, what it felt like. And so when I was in it for most of my life, 70-80% of my life, there was an insult to injury of being hungry. Okay, now we have a solution. We do have food stamps, or we do have someone gave you $10 or whatever. But then it was that added kind of embarrassment of riches. It's sort of like, oh, I'm on someone else's borrowed time and money. Therefore, I shouldn't get that thing over there that I really want. I really want the cupcake. I really want the steak. But I'm going to go ahead and get the pork and beans because that's where you put me.
Yeah.
that's a part of a de-stigmatizing that we have to think about too, because it's so there. It's like this judgment. Think about if you would judge someone if you saw them getting a certain thing on food stamps. Would you judge them in line? And why would you? What right do you have if you would? So starting to retrain ourselves is the idea.
Right. And it is, I always like just adding, you trigger different anecdotes when I hear you talk. One of the biggest pivots that they've made here in downtown Dallas is that they were always giving the homeless in this one section called Deep Ellum area. They were always giving them cold things. And those cold sandwiches would just be thrown away blocks away, because for some homeless people, it had been months since they actually had something hot.
Yeah.
It's simple as that. Sounds good. And I was one of the complainers, I'll be the person. And they changed it, and it made a huge difference. They stopped in the food.
Yeah, I once talked. I mean, I grew up in Dallas, and that Deep Ellum that hits home. But I once talked to a homeless man in Philadelphia one night, and I asked if I could talk, talk to him, because I really wanted to understand him. He was a Black man, probably in his late 20s, early 30s, and he had been a highly trained chef, and he had started taking drugs and become addicted. And lost things. He lost his ability to make rent, and then he found himself homeless in the cold of Philadelphia. But he was a highly trained chef. These are people, and they could be you. And if they have been, people who know. But if you haven't experienced it, you can't look at it as like, what did they do to get themselves there? What happened to them? It could be you. It's just like when a tornado comes through town and hits this house and not that one. It's simple as that. It could have been your house.
Correct.
You don't look at the other house and go, I can't believe those guys. I can't believe them. Let's walk the other way. They probably have something going on. You say, that could have been me. That could have been me, and I'm going to help them.
Correct. Absolutely. I love that. I could sit here and talk to you all day. So, Arlan, I want to pivot for a second. One of the things that we've observed that you've been, it seems like you're more adamant about it, is that on Twitter, you've been talking about the ability to brag about yourself and celebrating people who brag about their achievements, right? Including the Oprah thing. I remember that tweet. So yesterday we had a focus on women in food, and a lot of them are unsung or unheard of, but we gave a particular emphasis to allow them space to convene and share their stories. And so a lot of them are going to see this video today. And so what would you say to women in food who maybe are a little bit uncomfortable or shy, and they might have partners that are men, and the men love them, but sometimes women, they get put in the shadows or get put behind. What advice would you inspirational words would you give them?
Yeah, we just spent a time talking about how at one point I was homeless and on food stamps, if I was lucky to get the food stamps. And now I have taken myself, with the help of other people, to a new level, a new place where it was my goal to get to, right? So why would I keep that quiet? Why wouldn't I celebrate that? That's A. B is, I wish that for all of us. We have a lot of time to make up for it, especially women have a lot of time to make up for it. And I say especially women, but it's really across the board.
Sure.
We have a finite amount of time on this planet. And then in that, what has held you back? What has been, 10 years ago, could you imagine where you are today, and for good or worse, right? But if you're at all proud of yourself, or if you've accomplished anything, even if it's accomplishing what you did this week, there should be nothing holding you back from talking about it. Because the biggest thing is if you're not able to do it for yourself, do what I talk about, which is loosening the pickle jar for someone behind you. And by what you're doing, by bragging, what you're doing by saying, yes, actually, I did that, is you're giving someone else permission to do it, who may need to do it to get themselves out of a bad situation. They may need to do that as an inspiration you're simply helping them. You will be surprised, if it hasn't already happened to you, you'll be surprised by how many people come to you later in life, a week from now, a year from now, a decade from now, and say, I saw you speak at South by. I saw you stand up for 2 minutes at South by. And when you mentioned that you had kids at home, but you were able to get your pickles at the farmer's market, it just the right thing hit at the right time, and it told me I could do that too with my cookie line.
Amen.
How incentivized, is that? Like, I would want to do it just for that. It's not about me. It's about what can it inspire in others.
Yes. Arlan, you're talking to me.
Excellent.
I'm so serious. So, Arlan, I just have two more questions for you. So, you wear a lot of hats, and different people know you for primarily one of your hats, but know you do all these things. And for a lot of people, that's a very real reality when you're trying to do anything of impact, right? So, how do you balance it all? How do you give emphasis here, but know that this may not get your emphasis? Do you have any words of wisdom for people who are impact-minded and not necessarily anecdotally, this one thing, that one thing?
I would say I do a lot of things. They tell me to stay in my lane a lot, and I don't listen to them. But I do stay in my lane. The lanes are just stacked, right?
Okay.
So it's a focus.
Okay.
So if you see me doing different things, know that it's always going in the same direction. So I actually don't recommend having 4 or 5 things that you work on that are pulling you in different directions, because you're only going to be mediocre at all of them.
Okay, got it.
You want to be, and think about it as a business strategy, right? Same thing. Speaking up for yourself and bragging about yourself is a business strategy, because it brings awareness to what you're doing and brings partnerships and things into your orbit. Think about going forward, having different ways you're meeting people, because you just said that different people know me from different things. If I only did one thing, highlight the thing I'm doing, the main thing I'm doing, I would miss out on so many people hearing about it, because not everybody cares about venture capital. But hey, what did I do? I wrote a book, and I wrote a book that was super relatable. So now you have this whole group of people, but the book was about the venture capital, was about the main thing, was about getting investment into dollars into, underrepresented, underestimated founders. So now people they have the awareness of it. Then I have a podcast called Your First Million. And that's a whole different group of people. And they come in through the conversations. But what do? I'm ultimately talking about generational wealth. I'm talking about building your businesses. It's all going there. And some of the founders, some of the people watching are going to be future people I invest in one day. Because it's all going here. It's all going here. So everything that I do, including HireRunner.co, which is matching talent with companies, everything I do is in the same direction. I talk about having 7 income streams, but they're not 7 different topics. There are 7 income streams in the same direction.
Correct.
So stack the lane.
Yeah, I was just about to repeat that again. I love that. Same lane, but you're stacking in the same direction. Brilliant. So, Arlan, our time here has been amazing. Thank you so much for taking your time. And we just have one last question that we want to leave everyone with. And that question is about what is the most exciting thing when you think of food and our future? And of course, this is called the future of food at South by Southwest.
Yeah.
the one thing that you can just leave our audience with that you have a lot of hope for when you look forward, when you think of food and you think about the future?
I think it's very nascent for me, so I don't know a ton about it, but I like this idea of individuals being able to like have their own gardens and have their like make their own way. You know, I think, and I know that that's from the beginning of time, obviously, but and in some countries that's just the way it is. It's like everybody has their own garden, and that's where you get your food. But I just think that's really interesting, and I think that like it's just exciting to me to believe that maybe the next 42 years I'll learn how to not only consume the food, but to maybe grow it or maybe cook it or something of that nature. It's still a nascent thought, but it does give me a lot of joy, and it also is where I'm looking when I look at investments. Like, these places, and that's where I've actually learned the most about it is like a couple of companies here and there who are working on making it possible for you to have your own kind of plot on this earth.
Yeah. Yes. it's being more intentional and knowing where your food comes from.
Yeah,
consuming it.
It's really interesting to me. Like I think we count on other people to bring us everything. Like it's like this invisible millions of people who are picking things for us and cooking and preparing and in factories. Someone like Khalees, she would be great to talk to. Khalees has her own farm, and she puts these videos up on Instagram. And check it out. It's so fun to watch her, and it's like, oh, I guess anybody could have done that, right? This is what how we started. It was this.
Yeah, very good. Thanks again, Arlan, so much for being a part of Future of Food. And again, we consider you such a friend. And so we look forward to much more exchange and collaboration. And we just continue to just root for you in not only destigmatizing food insecurity, but also that you're backing it up with investment that makes impact and that matters to people. We love that you do that, and we just root you on. Thanks you so much.
Thank you, and thanks everybody.